Hey everyone, this is Saswat, co-founder, CTO of Wokelo. We are an investment research platform. I'm joined by Yohei Nakajima, founder of BabyAGI, one of the most prominent AI builders of our time, also general partner at Untapped Capital. Yohei, welcome to this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We're doing this podcast on AI agents for financial services. So we'll go deeper into agents and more specifically enterprises and financial services in particular. So in terms of an agenda, we'll kind of start off with a little bit of a background on what is an agent, what are the different architectures, kind of go slightly deeper into how a financial services agent is different. We'll talk about a little bit of decision points for an agentic platform in terms of UX, flows. We'll talk about challenges in kind of deploying agents in a production environment. We'll talk a little bit about interesting applications in the space that Yohei has seen, talk a little bit about Pippin, the latest project by Yohei, and then of course, we'll kind of end it off with a roadmap of how this space may kind of play out. But yeah, Yohei, again, excited to have you. We can get started.
Let's do it. I think we're starting with what's an agent, right?
Yeah, we're starting at the highest level. What's an agent? But if you could kind of talk about what's an agent, how do you define an AI agent, and then maybe what are the different architectures and where does something like a baby AGI kind of fit in, and would be great to kind of start from there.
Yeah, I think it's helpful context to realize that we've always connected different API calls to get to automate things, right? And this is not necessarily new. We've had this before large language models. But with large language models, we have a new kind of API almost that provides reasoning, which allows us to do more or things we couldn't do with just API calls previously. And I think, when people say AI agent, they think it covers a pretty broad spectrum of things. Pretty much anytime you combine a couple of LLM calls in a chain or an LLM call and API call, people start calling that an agent. I think as you get to more autonomous agent, people start looking for more kind of dynamic agents that maybe have a library of skills and can dynamically choose what to do next. Right? I think that's, and I think there's a wide range and kind of a different automation types that you can go from full automation to automating bits and pieces of it. But on the very hard coded end, where the developers are deciding which API calls and which LLM calls to call and in which order, I've been calling that handcrafted agents, but Anthropic started calling those workflows. So I think there's some pushback against calling those agents, probably to make the term less confusing, but ultimately it still is a little bit of a confusing term.
Understood. Yeah, I think workflows, agents, all of those are kind of very interchangeably used now. You hear, right? So something like a baby AGI, the framework. That's probably the first large-scale, widely accepted framework on the space, right? So that would be something on the fully autonomous side of things, right?
Yeah, I'd say that one, right? Like the initial goal was to take an objective, parse it out into tasks, tackle the tasks one by one, and then add new tasks if necessary, really trying to let the AI kind of drive it. And then more recent iterations, we're having it write code that it tries to run as it's figuring out what it needs to do next.
Understood. Yeah, I think, and when we also kind of started Wokelo, this was slightly pre the ChatGPT era, so kind of built a lot of our own stack. So RAG before it was called RAG, agents before it was called agents. We would also kind of largely fall under the handcrafted bucket, and due to a number of reasons, due to working with financial services, and some of those will kind of dabble into towards the later part, right? So, but yeah, that makes sense.
I remember that definitely stood out when we first started talking, right? With something like financial agents, right? Wokelo that we use for due diligence as well. You want to have a kind of a repeatable report coming out, because I want to be able to look at it and know where to look for things, right? I don't want the report to be completely different and have to teach it to do new things. So I think for anybody building, it's worth noting that it does seem like, at least today, the workflows or handcrafted agents is where it's easier to create and add value to organizations, because the highest value tasks to automate are the ones that are repeated often. And if it's a task that's repeated often, you don't necessarily need the AI to like dynamically decide how to do it, especially if there's a large enough market where people are following that same kind of same workflow already.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. I mean, fundamentally, LLMs in nature are non-deterministic, right? So just getting them to kind of, let's say, chart from A to B to C in a certain manner, so that again point towards the whole financial services agent. People are not, if it is very non-deterministic, then that is something that will not fly, right? Similarly, in financial services, the whole hallucination bit of it, right? So if there's even a little bit of error as you work with a private equity firm or a investment banking kind of a client, that's something that's not gonna be acceptable. But agents and LLMs in construct are supposed to be flowy and non-deterministic. That kind of, I mean, that's something that we have been grappling with the last like several months, and I think a lot of things you can do in the architecture to kind of just ensure it maintains that reasonable amount of consistency. But yeah, that's something that is top of the things that we kind of focus on as a company from our side.
I mean, with financial services, you're often taking so many different data sources, right, and combining them and then recombining them at the top. And if you think about the potential for hallucination or mistakes at the LLM level, it's exponential, right? Because if you have one area in one of the small chunks, it kind of comes up. I mean, I think one big aspect of building is managing that prompt, right? Especially as you update your tool, update underlying sources, update prompts, the model updating. If I remember, you guys have a pretty robust like prompt management system that you guys baked in yourself.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We I mean, since we again started much earlier, we had to build a lot of the LLM observability stack that you see a lot of kind of startups kind of coming up in that space. But absolutely, I think the whole observability, and that becomes even more tricky problem for agents, right? So how do you kind of observe each of those prompts? And now that we're in a world where I mean, a lot of LLMs kind of perform in that kind of a level, and at every point you want to ensure that you kind of using the most latest or best performing model for that particular task, right? So in a lot of cases, I mean, you don't need like a large LLM for example as well, right? So in some cases, a very small model which is faster can kind of really do the work. But how do you kind of define which tasks are those unless you really monitor what is what, right? So that's something that, I mean, we kind of really focus a lot of time in kind of getting the whole prompt management orchestration layer to just ensure that the quality of output is up to the mark here.
Yeah. And not just the quality, but also I think last time we were talking about how depending on this type of data, it might be okay to present multiple values, but in some kinds of data, you really want to provide one source, right? If you're analyzing a whole bunch of documents and doing a summary of like top level revenue, you really want to make sure you're capturing the latest. But if you're giving kind of market sizing, then you probably, it's okay to grab different sources and say, here's the different sources, here's the different market sizes they're providing. So yeah, needing to make those decisions around kind of UX, right? In terms of like based on the type of data, based on the strength of the LLM.
Yeah. No, absolutely, right? So, I mean, we focus on the private market side of things, right? So, in this case, again, I mean, we had to also start off trying to solve the underlying layer. I mean, in public markets, maybe a lot of the data, and I mean, we do public markets as well, but in private market, unless you also solve the underlying data, whether that's kind of through partnerships, through your building your own kind of data pipelines, is not really something great an agent can do on top of it, right? So yeah, that's something very interesting in terms of, I mean, being able to solve the underlying blocks as well to kind of get to that agent who can do a high fidelity task, right? But yeah, we can jump to the next part, right? So, I mean, would love to, I mean, as a VC and as a builder, you've seen so many examples of startups and in your own use case as well. So when you kind of build a agent platform or agent company, a lot of these UX or product flow decisions that you need to make, and we'd love to kind of maybe hear your thoughts on some of those, right? So let's say, I mean, post the chat GPT kind of an era, every company kind of started off being a very chat kind of an interface, right? To ask something, get something out. So what's the point of view, right? What's the point of is that the right UX, or you've seen a lot of like different examples kind of come up in the whole, I mean, is chat the best UX for an agentic kind of a platform, or we'd love to kind of get your thoughts on that.
I think when it comes to UX in any industry, there's a combination of customers looking for solutions that work for them, and a lot of experimentation. People are testing out what they like, and as an industry, we're figuring it out. And then on the other hand, there's also a kind of what I would call industry leader driven UX, where if there's an industry leader, the UX that they push gets adopted, right? I mean, iPhone clearly had that impact on mobile phone. And I think to some extent, OpenAI is having that effect on the large language model space. And ChatGPT specifically, again, I think less so for OpenAI's decision, but like as a result of people leaning in so hard into this chat interface and it just working, I think there's no question that the chat interface is kind of the de facto, right? Again, partially driven by demand, partially driven by the large leaders leaning into it. And then what we've seen over time is that these chat models have become more and more what I would call agentic. They started by adding tools. They're adding now kind of behind the scenes reasoning, where they're kind of, and in some cases, I think they're combining both the reasoning and search steps. I think if you're using something like GPT-4o, they'll do web search and whatnot. So we're seeing agentic baked into the chat. And then parallel to that, when after BabyAGI launched, BabyAGI was 100 lines of code, a simple loop. I saw a lot of people build their own version of BabyAGI, right? Whether it was a different language, whether it was adding a couple different tools in. But one thing that really stood out was that quickly that agentic core workflow felt more like a feature within a larger system. So we had tools like Auto RPG that was using that reasoning flow, but then leveraging existing tool sets to build a game level. Right. I think Omni was another one that kind of started looking at the sales use case and really leaning in on how can this core loop be used for sales. So the tooling they added was sales specific related, researching the company, researching the people, enriching the person. And then you have companies like AutoGrid, which started looking at let's put agents in individual cells, which creates a spreadsheet type view to automate research at large. And all these different iterations were no longer just the core autonomous agent loop, but really baking it in different ways, in different places. And I think, those are just a couple of decisions. I think there's a lot of different decisions from UI, UX, customer type. Is it developer or consumer or business?
Understood. No, amazing. I mean, end of the day, I think it really ties to the specific business use case that you're solving for, right? So how your, let's say, customer or TG is used to kind of dabbling with that particular problem, right? So your TG is in Excel, you kind of try to embed into that. In fact, in Wokelo as well, right, we started off, it's a conscious call till now as well. We decided it will not be like a very chat kind of a platform because, of course, you can build a chat layer on a lot of things, but we just wanted to kind of align more on specific workflows that users have. In this case, I'm still referring to a workflow as a more of autonomous kind of an item there, right? So, and to that point, right? So even the ties to the whole, as we also kind of chat with enterprises, right? So there's a lot of, the initial foot in the door is towards a web app, right? So you start with a web app, you get users kind of come to that. But as we kind of elevate the discussion with a CXO team or CTO or a CDO, the discussion more or less always kind of goes into an API, right? So how could you really package what you have and then embed into their workflows, right? That's something we feel that will really make agents go mainstream, right? So while everyone is talking about agents, but we all kind of know that there's still a long way to go for enterprises to adopt agents in mainstream, right? So it's still maybe like a fraction of use cases still that is being served by companies. So yeah, it's a lot of interesting items to be kind of thought about from that sense, right?
Yeah. The Copilot is another, I guess that one's more chat, but that one feels a little more agentic because it's baked into a tool. And then I think in your case, you guys do pretty long reports, right? Which is a very different UX from a chat where you have to kind of bring them back again versus having it immediately solved. And that's just a new experience where people aren't used to it. Right? People are used to asking people for things and waiting, but people are not used to asking for computer for things and waiting. So you have to build that UX and kind of expectation around that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a similar kind of a note, you right? So as a startup founder, we get asked this question quite a lot, but I get a chance to ask this back to you, right? What do you think is a moat, right? This whole world of agents. As a VC, you would be evaluating so many startups. You are a builder yourself, but where do you think maybe even like a medium-term moat or defensibility lies in the space of agents, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can start with the short term, which is I do think it's important to kind of track best practices, figure out what's happening in the market, which allows you to continuously iterate and stay up top of things, right? Because especially right now, so many people are paying attention to AI. You are able to make these kind of huge jumps as new models or new tools come out. And if you're on top of it, it is a great way to kind of capture and maintain attention. And we're seeing this happen in a couple of companies. In the more medium term, I do think having a kind of a reputation for having reliable output, especially when it comes to financial services, is really important, right? It's really, really easy to build a flashy demo that shows you what the AI could do, but it's much harder to build a tool that can consistently give that output, especially when you include edge cases, right? I think it used to be that like 20% of the work was, 80% of the effort. 20% of the time to get 80% done, but then 80% of the time to do the last 20%. I think that's even bigger now, right? Like I feel like that kind of last mile is just so much harder to do, especially as you sell more expensive solutions to bigger, more trustworthy institutions that, on the flip side, also need to make sure their output of their AI tools is just as reliable.
Yeah. No, I mean, you kind of mentioned a great point, right? It's a great segue also to kind of talk a little bit about some of the challenges as you kind of deploy something agentic, which is, let's say, multi-layered, autonomous, to a production kind of a use case, right? So, and I mean, in our case as well, I think one of the most underrated things in this is the whole testing bit of it. I mean, of course, let's say you're building some software, it's still like a lot of like 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 kind of workflows. But in agentic, the whole thing really changes, right? So unless you really test out, let's say this is a 5-layer or a 7-layer agent, unless you really like layer in the entire business context and test out a bunch of edge cases, you really will never kind of get to that high fidelity, right? No enterprise would kind of still go for a solution that, I mean, we live in a world of flashy demos, but very few kind of companies or products out there can kind of provide that high fidelity. So absolutely, I think the whole testing and getting it to kind of a reliable level of accuracy is like a problem. I mean, is a point very less talked about in this space here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when it comes to kind of go-to-market customer type, it is important to figure out, what are the workflows you're automating? How similar are they across your customer types? Another way to think about it is, for example, if you're an e-commerce store and you're handling returns based on customer complaints, I'm guessing that's a pretty standard workflow that most e-commerce sites have. That's standard, which is why you could actually probably build a solution without using LLMs technically. Of course, if you add LLMs, you can add a little reasoning layer to make sure that you can capture some of the edge cases, maybe even write a friendly note back to the customer after it's been handled. Versus, I mean, in your case, right, due diligence for companies, or if it's a very kind of concentrated industry, right, consulting might be another example. The workflows might be different from company to company just because it's a much more complex workflow, which is when you're starting to thinking about customization. So I'm sure you guys are seeing kind of the initial pitch being, hey, look at the report we can produce. But as soon as you start talking to them a little bit more, they want to know about customization. That's not how we do things. How do you do it for us this way? And I do think those kind of decisions, again, are going to be different for different LLM companies. But I think that's another thing that you have to kind of iteratively figure out based on like who are our customer types, what are the biggest problems they're facing that we can solve, right? And then is this a similar, repeatable workflow across the industry, or is it one that requires much more hand-holding and customization?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think customization is something that is core and again, very related to enterprises in general, right? So, I mean, a lot of discussions we also have is, can we create a new workflow? And this is something how we are used to doing diligence. This is how we are used to doing monitoring a portfolio. A lot of those are very bespoke to the organization. So how do you still orchestrate something from the back end that is fairly self-serve, but nuanced to kind of capture that business value? That's something that's kind of come up quite a bit, right? And the other angle also I'll bring in on the whole production ready from customer centric perspective is just layering in the business context, right? So in our case, for example, we like you mentioned, we deal with a lot of private companies, right? So I think one very common problem that you see in this field is there's so many namesake companies, right? It's a very simple problem. Like let's say what is company's exit strategy? And if you not get the right company, then everything kind of falls apart, right? So as we kind of doing this maybe a year or so back, is we kind of found a company called Sterling, and that had some 10 or 12 same namesake companies all doing different types of businesses, right? So then what you need to do is kind of just, the whole entity mapping, a lot of those legacy NLP techniques. Now I think everyone is kind of like, there's a lot of focus on LLMs in general, but a lot of problems don't need a LLM, right? So you can solve something through NER, apply a basic NLP kind of technique, and marry, of course, with the business context. That is how that you ensure that the quality is high, you ensure that the business context is kind of adhered to as well, right?
Yeah, making sure that you don't grab the two companies twice can be can be challenging, right? Especially if it's like because sometimes you do have companies with the same, very similar names in the same industry, which ultimately ends up having kind of similar. So as you said, I'm assuming you're doing some sort of hard-coded matching, like checking the URL if it's a match. But just because the URLs don't match, don't mean they're the same companies, because sometimes companies have more than one URL. That's a challenge. What other challenges did you see I think one thing that most people building agents figure out is as soon as you deploy an agent and people start using it, you do run into these issues and challenges, matching companies being another one. I'd love to hear kind of any other like major ones that pop out to you as you were building this out and kind of solving it.
Yeah, absolutely right. So I'll take an example of a typical workflow, right? So we spoke about companies. So let's say company research is a typical workflow. User would come in, they'll mention a company, you can like choose the kind of analysis you want to do, and then some Wokelo would kind of pull it out, right? So typical company research workflow, which can kind of be an output, be in the format of a long document, we're kind of looking at the LLM ops tool that we have, take around 900 to around 1200 calls. I'm combining, let's say, open source as well as a closed source kind of open source being our like own foundation models along with like a lot of closed source LLMs that we use. So let's think about like 1,000 calls kind of happen to orchestrate a single report. And now that we have, in the platform, in a few hours, let's say hundreds of those reports kind of run, right? So just orchestrating that scale of calls and backups and redundancies, and will of course run into rate limits. There's a latency thing. There is a prioritization of customer, or the prioritization of, let's say, there's a like internal user versus an external user. So a lot of, the whole, again, tied to the testing part, but the entire engineering part of kind of orchestrating something like that is a massive challenge, right? So, as we have kind of gone along in the company, we have kind of made our analysis more complex. That adds more layers. That just adds that engineering complexity, right? So again, proud to have.
I'm curious, right? Like if you have a whole bunch of sources, like if I'm designing it in my head, the first version would be like, let's just grab all the sources. Let's look through each one, grab data that's relevant to each section, and then for each section, grab all the data and combine them into the section. Sounds way too simple to actually work that way, right? Like realistically, you're doing a lot of back and forth between probably having kind of modular error check tools. Can you walk me through like what are some of the big steps you made that as you kind of went from like a simple architecture to I think what you have now? And then also be curious, like how do you build it in a way where it doesn't get too complex, where other people can still understand what's going on?
Yeah. I think we of course started off with something like that, right? So, you have a bunch of sources, you kind of do RAG or whatever it was called back in the day, but you kind of do a search using that, you extract some answers, then you kind of check whether those answers kind of made the pass that you want. As we kind of went along, a lot of these workflows started becoming more complex, right? So let's say you're looking at a company, there are like these 10 different sections that are very modular, looking at a industry, looking at a market map, looking at a portfolio. There's a lot of different of these analysis. So at a highest level, yes, so you look at a source. That source can be anything from, let's say, your partnership to, let's say, someone uploaded a bunch of files to, let's say, a public kind of a web as a source, right? So, and all of those kind of bring in those complexities, right? So let's say you're working with files, so then you of course deal with lot of things from like understanding a PPT. In our case, we deal with a lot of PPTs that, let's say, a private equity firm or a VC would kind of upload, right? So those will, I mean, then you need to figure out where a typical OCR kind of works versus where a typical vision model kind of works, and where do you ensure there's a hybrid model, right? So, and also as you kind of build something like this, you still have to keep in mind that the underlying models will start getting much better. So you don't really need to solve how well a particular model, let's say back in the day it was GPT-3, right? So how well a GPT-3 kind of does. Back in the day there was no vision model. So you don't need to necessarily solve for how vision model works or how well a O1 or a O3 now kind of works, right? So you don't solve that part of things, but let's say ingesting those files, understanding those prioritization of sources, working on each of those modules to really align with what customers are kind of doing that. Let's say there are a lot of users in the platform, they give you feedback. How do you kind of build that feedback loop that improves the entire or agent workflow? Those are the things we kind of prioritize. So we took a conscious call that will not solve things that will eventually be solved by LLM. But when you're working in a very vertical kind of a environment, there are a lot of these problems that you still need to solve for it to kind of really do well. Yeah.
Yeah, the vision model thing is interesting. I know a lot of people were working on figuring out how to do OCR and then feed that in. And as soon as the vision model came out, I was like, oh, why don't we just use the vision model to solve for that? It just solves so many problems. But there's definitely the kind of trying to skate where the puck's going aspect to building.
Yeah. Awesome. On the related note of like issues in production, right? So what's your take on latency here, right? So, of course, we are kind of users are kind of used to a lot of real-time kind of things. O1 is, I think, one of the first models that kind of started breaking it down, and it took you like a minute or something to process, right? But what's your take on latency? Because, as agents become more and more complex, let's say a Devin, for example, on a different context, right? You add more layers, but that kind of really adds the complexity, adds the latency part of it. So what's your take on this? Does everything have to be real-time? Do you see a lot of agents being non-real time as we kind of go down the line here?
Yeah, I think when it comes to using AI, some of my favorite AI use cases are ones that run in the background, right? Like we have a couple of email addresses internally that are constantly being monitored by AI. I can just send an email to them. And I guess that ends up being the trigger, but the AI is constantly running and always looking. And we have another AI that's regularly checking and pulling the news and summarizing it and tracking it for me. Right? These kind of what I would call passive AI, I think, are going to increasingly become valuable, right? And so to that extent, I do think, ultimately latency is a matter of kind of expectations, right? And that's the challenge, is that as people shift from a chat-based UI to a more complex workflow, how do you retain that same user experience? And one way people have solved it is to show, for example, with O1 Pro, it's much longer, and they give you the option to kind of click on thinking so that you can watch how it's thinking. But my personal experience is if it's O1 Mini, I will open that up and watch it. But if it's O1 Pro, it's so slow that I will almost always walk away and do something else before I come back to check on O1 Pro's answer. So I don't think O1 Pro is really working. I think in your case, you kind of do the come back later, we'll shoot you an email. I think that works absolutely great, right? If it's going to take more than 20 minutes or so, or 15 minutes, you want to kind of have that workflow, but setting that expectation and then, having the tools in place to remind them to come back, I think are two big aspects of latency. But you've also had to deal with this, right? I'm sure, because a lot of people were switching from chat interface to yours, and I'm sure you got some complaints or people trying to figure out how to get that into their workflow and get used to it.
Yeah. In our case as well, like I said, I think our typical, let's say, company research or industry research will take 15-20 minutes. Depends a little bit on, how many reports are kind of running in the platform, right? So no, absolutely. I think one of the first things people ask is, where's the report, right? I've queued it up. Why don't you have it in a minute, right? So yeah, it's a lot of, I think, expectation setting. I think the same thing, let's say, I'm an ex-consultant myself, right? So let's say you're working with an analyst and there's a task that you gave it. It's not that you'll get the answers or get the output immediately, right? So a little bit of conditioning, and as a company as well, as we kind of go along, of course, there's a lot of engineering to get that 20 minutes to 5 minutes. That's something that is doable, but we still definitely try to tell our users, customers that, a lot of good things still take some time, but yeah, that's something we hear a lot from a lot of our customers in terms of latency. Yeah.
That reminds me, I wonder if like a Domino's pizza tracker would work for you, right? Wokelo is collecting all your data sources. Like we're currently summarizing each data source. We're combining them into different parts and having that kind of workflow. I think there's still more experimentation to be done, but
yeah. No, absolutely. I think what you do in that wait time and how do you kind of engage the user, whether that's through information in terms of what's happening, whether you get them to do something else in the platform, or just I think that's just nailing that UX is very uncharted territory. So even we are kind of experimenting a bunch of items on that front to just how do you engage a user in that particular time frame while something is getting ready, right?
Yes, we talked about this before on a call, but this is relevant enough and it's my favorite. But the story of the airport that solved complaints of waiting for luggage. I think it was an airport was receiving a lot of complaints that after people landed at the airport, they had to wait a long time once they got to the baggage carousel. And the way they solved it was to actually make people take a longer way route to the baggage carousel, and that actually solved those complaints. So I do think there are unique. That might not be the best answer, but there are ways to like solve for latency issues by creating different user experiences.
Yeah, that's an amazing example. I also kind of quote that a couple of times. No, it's really what you do in that latency. Right? It's something beyond a point you cannot do much, right? So then what do you do in that particular time is what defines. And it's awesome. I think covered kind of a lot of points with regards to challenges of deploying it. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, right? So you are seeing a bunch of startups in this space come up, right? So, maybe a couple of interesting examples of enterprise workflows, agentic workflows that you've kind of come up in the last few months.
There's one area that I'm fascinated in is just, the simple immediate automation, right? So I think AutoGrid is a great example of just a whole bunch of agents running at once, where I'll sometimes use it if I have, maybe I'll have a list of 200 VCs and their firm names, and I want to quickly find out what sectors they invest in, right? Being able to just drop in the first two columns of a spreadsheet, just define the other columns, and then just press run and see the agent, run 10,000 times. Kind of what you're doing at Wokelo, but making it easy for me to kind of like build these on the fly for large groups. That's one that I've really enjoyed using myself. On a far end, there's a company I came across, not a portfolio, called Wonder Family that's going all the way from analyzing trending products, looking at the top products on Amazon that sell those, and looking at their descriptions and user reviews, just defining what are the most important aspects of that product, then looking at companies that can build it, or looking for ways to source that product, all the way to getting it to production and selling it. And they're really trying to automate that whole flow. And that's fascinating to me, right? That's not one single agent, but really trying to automate building a company from ground up. And I think we're seeing more and more of these, what I call LLM native companies, where they're really building a company in a way that wouldn't be possible without LLMs. And the stuff that excites me more on the kind of B2B aspect is companies that do feel kind of LLM native, helping enterprises use LLMs in a helpful way. But it does get challenging quickly, because for a large enterprise, you do often need access to the company's tools, the company's data sources.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in enterprise, the whole security part of it, and then that kind of brings a lot of discussion in terms of on-prem models and things like that. That's something even we kind of had to go through. But yeah, with enterprises, the entire lock-in is very interesting, and that's I think where a lot of value can really be created. No, I think amazing examples, and I think this may be the year agents become absolutely mainstream, and we see it really like a vast array of use cases across the board, right? So
it is interesting to realize from like this wide range of challenges that enterprises are facing, right? There's one aspect that startups are a benefit from, which is that like they can just lean in and experiment. But as you get to bigger and bigger companies, depending on the clients or industry, there are a lot of challenges with using LLMs, right? Some of them have been solved. I think a really early major one was like, is our data going to be used for training? I feel like we've solved that through some of the kind of Azure OpenAI endpoints being more secure. But there is, there are still companies who just can't see any of their data leave their premises or their, at all. So it's still hard to use off-prem models. So we need on-prem. And if you're doing on-prem, you need different kind of, stacks and solutions. And there's a lot of effort trying to keep those on-prem models up to date with the more closed models, because on-prem tends to be more open source. And then I think there's the continuing push for like local, smaller models that can run on device. I think a big use case for enterprise is going to be like on the ground kind of construction and, people not sitting in front of a computer, which is where a lot of LLM use cases get interesting. But for those, like, do you use an API for latency? Is it better to have it on device? What are the issues? All that kind of stuff. So yeah, pretty fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And I mean, it's kind of moving on to the next bit, right? So, I mean, you created BabyAGI, which is like a framework of how an agent can be orchestrated, right? So, what kind of motivated you to, again, come up with Pippin, and how do you see something like that play out in the near to medium term? Very excited to hear. I see a lot of...
So people who don't have context, I think it's worth mentioning that there is an interesting, crypto is to some extent coming back, right? With the crypto-friendly administration and just a lot more attention on the space, especially compared to the last kind of 2 years or so where the winter was happening since the big boom in kind of 2021-ish. And specifically in the last few months, since around October of 2024, there's been a large focus on AI agents in the crypto space. It's a space I've been following, kind of intersection of AI Web3. I did notice the early kind of rise in AI agents tied to tokens, which kind of started as like meme coins in AI, now kind of turning into AI coins. But the whole space has been pretty interesting. And in November, one of the pictures I posted on Twitter spurred a meme coin. So I decided to turn that unicorn, it was a picture, SVG picture of a unicorn, into an AI agent. So I have a fully automated Twitter account. Because it was kind of a kid-friendly image, decided to lean in on the kids' IP, did a bedtime stories podcast, refactored the AI unicorn, and now releasing a AI framework called Pippin, which is based on BabyAGI. So that's the quick context of your question. What inspired me was what always does, right? Which is watching what builders are doing, and kind of following my interest, which is how I decide what to build. And I thought this intersection of AI and Web3 was fascinating, specifically AI agents and tokens was an area that seemed to make sense for me to explore. So that was what had me lean in on it. And it's been really interesting. I think a couple of things that excite me watching it is open source is really powerful on its own, especially like the fact that people contribute to projects and make projects ongoing without monetary incentive is, I think, one of the beauties of open source. But one of the beauties of crypto and Web3 is this really easy way to track how people contribute to a project and offer them rewards monetarily. And not only that, if you tie a project's value to a token, people who hold the token have a monetary incentive to contribute to the project. And across some of the projects out there, what I'm seeing is this interesting kind of motivation to both support and promote open source projects that are not purely altruistic, right? There's a monetary incentive. And in that intersection, even though it has challenges, I think there's something really fascinating there that's been a really motivating to kind of dig into and learn about.
Yeah, no, amazing. And how do you see, from a technical perspective, how do you see something like a Pippin play out, right? It's like a fully conscious being able to do so many tasks. That's how you kind of wish to take it from a technical perspective.
Yeah, so yes, I released the framework, which is kind of a 24/7 autonomous being framework where it can take a nap, it can go on a walk, and then sometimes it'll engage with the human world right now through social media. But now that I've started building out these, podcast channels, I'd love to do TikTok and YouTube. The question I've been asking myself is like, what if the next Bluey or Peppa Pig was an AI who was not only the character people loved, but also the company itself? What if it was generating its own content? What if it was producing new strategy ideas and implementing it? So it's very interesting to think about. I don't see why we couldn't have like the next kids IP be an AI who's also the CEO of a company, right?
Yeah, no. Amazing. It will be fascinating to kind of follow this space. Yeah.
And then back to you. I mean, as you're building out Wokelo, I know we have these reports, and I know there's, one of the things I like that you're doing is leaning more into kind of the smaller passive workflows as well, right? There's the portfolio monitoring. I'd love to hear kind of what's next for Wokelo as you go from kind of reporting to kind of full suite.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think from a short to medium term perspective, we work with like consulting firms, iBanks, Ps, so a lot of their use cases, whether that's screening, whether that's portfolio monitoring, whether that's assessing a potential incoming deal, how good or bad they are creating these alerts. Lot of these things that our TG associates, analysts would do on a very recurring kind of a manner. That's something we haven't. I think a lot of that is already now available and kind of rolled out to a lot of users, and that list has become reasonably long now as we kind of look at the future, Yohei. So I think the holy grail is being able to do a bunch of these complex analysis, right? So not just a company research, not just an industry research. Let's say you're working with a consulting firm who's preparing a market entry strategy for a Fortune 100 company. You're working with an investment banking firm who is preparing a presentation for a sponsor. You can do a lot of these very complex kind of deliverables, if you will, right? So let's say a 30-page slide deck or a 20-page rich memo, which involves a lot of qualitative as well as quantitative research, something that would ideally typically take 3 to 4 weeks and get it, let's say, within a few minutes in a high degree of fidelity. That is how I would kind of describe how a future of something like Wokelo kind of looks like, something like a super agent, if you will, right? So and that honestly is not too far away, right? I think with the underlying models and the kind of work we've done, I think we're reasonably there, and I think we'll kind of get to that point a few months from then. But that's the exciting part that really kind of unlocks, right? So you're able to do this complex analysis tied to the different persona that you're able to work with. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of, Replit Agent. I think coding agents are within the agent space. I think the two areas that they're being used most is coding and marketing, right? Marketing makes sense, content generation, writing blog posts, really good at it. Code, I think one reason it's really popular or moving ahead so fast is it's developers scratching their own itch, right? It's because it's people who are developers building it, like they know their own problem and they're building coding agents. But Replit Agent's been really improving since they launched, and I've started using it a lot more. Initially, I was just kind of like testing it, but it wouldn't quite get there. Now just through using multiple chats, I can get some pretty complex stuff built in languages I've never used. But I think what really stands out about them to me is that, they've been building this for 10 years, right? They've built all the kind of fundamental tools. So it did make me realize when I started seeing Replit Agent improve so much is that, like, if you want to build a helpful agent, it actually might make sense to build useful tools first, right, for your customer base, and then teach your agent to use those tools, right? So if I'm using Replit Agent, it'll ask me, be like, hey, by the way, we need to store OpenAI secrets. You want to just give it to me? We'll use our secrets. Oh, by the way, it seems to be erroring out. I wrote a test file. Do you want to run the test file? Here's a command. If you click run, it'll just run it in the shell, right? These are super helpful tools that they've built out. But they didn't build it for the agent. These are all tools they've already built for the user, and they're just now letting the agent run it for the user. And I'm guessing you're going through some of the similar stuff too, which is, once you have all the fundamental tools, there's so much you can do for a user.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we piloted something like a Slack bot and a Teams bot with a few of our clients. But yeah, absolutely. You got to be there where the kind of user is there in their native ecosystem. And I think just nailing some of that is going to be a crucial factor as you kind of try to make something like this more mainstream, right? So. Awesome. Awesome. I think we are up top of the hour in terms of the agenda we wanted to cover. It's been a fascinating discussion here. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks. It's been great, and look forward to seeing Wokelo continue to evolve.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Yohei. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.